Hi, everyone, and welcome to our July 2024 webcast. This month has been a whirlwind of activity in the cyber world, from the latest ransomware attacks to the largest outage in the history of information technology to the innovative defense strategies emerging from this year's rising trends. We've got a lot to cover. Join us as we break down these events and discuss what they mean for the future of cybersecurity. I'm John Cassell with Syxsense, and as always, I'm joined by my Italian counterparts, Blaze Fellow and Rocco Fiore. To kick things off, let's look back at a few topics we've discussed in the past and see if there are any new updates. First, Blaze, do you have any new information on topics we discussed last month?
Yeah, there's actually still ongoing exploits and investigations from some of the topics that we reviewed last month. We'll start with some of the new information, which would be with CDK. They're still dealing with the aftermath of the cyber attack that occurred in June, and reportedly they paid out about $25 million to cyber criminals to expedite that recovery. Snowflake is still in the news. You guys are probably still hearing about that, which was again an attack claimed by the Scattered Spider Collective, who I believe Rocco talked about that last month as well. AT&T allegedly paid out $370,000 instead of the demanded $1 million to delete their stolen data. It's important to note that this payout wasn't confirmed by AT&T, but they are quite a few reports indicating that a payment was made. With AT&T, it's the amount of data that was stolen that's alarming, being the 190 million customer records that were exposed, which includes anyone who runs on that AT&T's network, rather than the quality of the data, which in this case doesn't actually include any PII. A reminder for some of the other known impacted companies was Ticketmaster, Pure Storage, Advanced Auto Parts, Ticket Tech, which is based out of Australia, and Quote Wizard. And aside from those, an overall 100 customers have been confirmed as impacted, with approximately 165 businesses potentially exposed. And this is just one alarming event of the many we faced so far this year. Number of data breach victims is up by 490% compared to the first 6 months of 2023. Guys, who do you think, or like what companies do you think are the most affected in terms of like healthcare, financial companies, transportation, things like that would be the biggest surge so far in 2024?
Yeah. So we've seen a huge uptick in healthcare related data breaches because of Change Healthcare fiasco. And I think, as we can see, any incident where credentials are being breached and exfiltrated in mass, and then they're being put into this ransomware as a service,
Mhm.
supply chain now. And once they're in there, you don't know where it's going to come, when it's going to come, where it's going to come from, so to say. So I think it's important, right? Coming from a practical standpoint, what the message should be for every company um, is that you need to have a zero trust type of approach to security. You just have to assume that your stuff is out there, that someone has your credentials, that if you don't have MFA, at the very least, you're in a whole world of trouble, which is linked right to the Snowflake incident. So, um, yeah, I
Healthcare,
mean,
yeah.
I don't know if that's the exact answer to yours, but I think that's where the state of
No,
things are right now. So,
no, it's beautiful. Healthcare is definitely up there. John, do you have an answer as well? I
I think I
guess.
would have also said healthcare with United Health, but I mean,
Mhm.
the CDK Global event is quite alarming, especially just putting all your eggs in one basket with one vendor and affecting the whole auto industry for the
We've
most
seen a
part.
lot of that, yeah. From what I gathered with a company called Fast Company, they did a report, and actually financial companies have the biggest surge as of 2024, with a 67% increase, with healthcare being the second most. That was before something like you brought up earlier, which we'll bring up towards the end, with the traveling, the companies that are involved with that. So that number may change in future reports, but um, that's pretty much what I have so far. I know John reviewed Kaspersky last month, so I'd like to hand it back to him to give us an update on where Kaspersky lives today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah. So a month after the Biden administration's ban on Kaspersky Labs antivirus software in the US specifically. Situation has evolved and as well shows no sign of improvement. A few items, though, I thought was kind of interesting simply by looking up the name Kaspersky. So a few different items. Earlier this month, they proposed a third-party review of its software to demonstrate its independence from Russian government intervention. However, the US swiftly rejected that offer. The ban from last month also raised eyebrows regarding the labor impact. And I know that we discussed a bit of that last month and what it would actually mean for US employees, how many American jobs would be vacated. Fortunately, the estimate provided by Kaspersky themselves appears to be less than 50 layoffs with regard to US operations. So not great, but not a huge impact either. Apple also declined to issue a bug bounty to Kaspersky after the company disclosed 4 zero-day vulnerabilities in iPhone software, which were allegedly used to spy on Kaspersky employees and Russian diplomats. Kaspersky's spokesperson expressed disappointment, noting that the research team believed their findings were eligible for rewards from Apple's bug bounty program. However, Apple's security team cited policy reasons for the refusal. I thought that was very interesting. And most recently, Kaspersky also made other headlines for reporting that at least 25% of the Wi-Fi hotspots intended for use at the Paris Olympics are unsafe, either due to lack of encryption standards or completely devoid of encryption entirely, which I thought was wild. Yeah, so yeah, that was great. Some great points, guys. Really appreciate it. We'll move forward into some advisories and updates from this past month. Let's look at a few July updates for operating systems and popular applications that receive some updates. And again, all with a focus on security. Plenty of products get updates. If they don't get stamped in any type of rating, don't really care to bring them up here. But in general, I always do want to say if products do receive updates, you should update. Going with what you said earlier, even though there may not actually be information out there, to, assume that you might be exploited. I would say the same thing. If you haven't patched yet, assume that you've already been breached. Microsoft Patch Tuesday, specifically released on July 9th, solved at least 139 issues in various flavors of Windows and a bunch of other Microsoft products. They also stated that attackers were already exploiting at least 2 of the vulnerabilities in active attacks against Windows users. The first 0-day, I've got it right here, is tracked as CVE 2024-38080. It's a Hyper-V bug that affects the modern versions of Windows, specifically 11 and Server 2022. This bug allows an attacker to increase their account privileges on a Windows device, and although Microsoft says the flaw is being exploited, it did offer very little information about its exploitation. Would have loved to see more, but there wasn't much out there yet. The other 0-day is CVE 2024-38112, which is a weakness in MS-HTML, the proprietary engine of Internet Explorer. And this is not the only time I think I'm going to be bringing up IE on today's call, surprisingly. Microsoft's advisory states, quote, successful exploitation of this vulnerability requires an attacker to take additional actions prior to exploitation to prepare the target environment. I also saw, specifically from Tenable, Satnam Narang, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, senior staff researcher, called special attention to CVE 2024-38021, a remote execution flaw in Microsoft Office. Attacks on this bug would lead to the disclosure of NTLM hashes, which could be leveraged as part of an NTLM relay attack, which would then let the attacker to pose as a legitimate user without needing to authenticate. It is also worth noting that SQL Server 2014, which has still over, reportedly, 100,000 instances publicly available, hit end of support last month, while also more than a quarter of the past month's updates are SQL Server related. I thought those were some very interesting numbers. Beyond Microsoft, Oracle has a quarterly advisory where they do a critical patch update about every 3 months. This July release patched, well, let me rephrase this. There were 175 CVEs on the 16th of July by providing 386 patches across 29 separate Oracle product families. Of the advisory, 26 patches were rated as critical severity and 174 as high. That's huge. Oracle Commerce took the cake with the most patches, while Java, which is typically what most are interested in, received 37. There are also 11 Java vulnerabilities that could be exploited over a network remotely without requiring authentication. And of course, the advisory provides the only solution to patch any and all affected products as soon as possible. I'm sure we would all say the same thing. But be sure to know your environment well, understand the risks of updating a framework like Java. Other business applications, at least in my experience, could easily be broken by something like this. Updating Python, updating a language specifically, can produce some heavy impacts. So be sure to take your environment through a phased approach. Also bear in mind that other Java derivatives received updates. Guys, remind me if I'm missing a few here: Adoptium, Amazon Corretto, OpenJDK. Of course, they all follow suit. Speaking of following suit, as this product as well has a lot of derivatives, Chrome. We know the Chromium browser is nested within a lot of others as well, like Brave and Microsoft Edge. There were 2 updates this last month. I just always like to bring up Chrome given the sheer volume of 0 days we've been hearing about, and it is obviously the most widely used browser. July 16th resolved 10 security fixes, 8 found by external researchers, all rated as high severity. I hope everybody updated for that one, with $34,500 bug bounty payout in total. And then a second on July 23rd brought Chrome to version 127 with 22 total fixes, 14 found by researchers. Thank you everybody for that. 3 rated as high severity, 8 medium, 3 low. They forked out 47,500 in bug bounties. Now, since the NVD backlog, of course, at the beginning of this year, I did notice, as I've been historically going through all the Chrome updates, that they had been forking out more since we've been relying more on the private industry as well as really any organization to rate their own updates. So I'm seeing that number go down now. This is something we've raised in the past. Still 34, 35,000, 47, 48,000 is a higher number. We are seeing some of the vulnerabilities getting a much higher payout than they used to get. Lastly, for kind of updates and vulnerabilities that we've seen, and then we'll kind of get into some new content. CISA KEV, can't skip it, or rather the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog. Since July started, there have been 13 additional vulnerabilities added, which include products such as, probably going to miss a few here or pronounce them incorrectly. I don't use all these products. Cisco NXOS, Rigetto, HTTP file server, the 2 0 days as well mentioned earlier from Microsoft's products, OSGeo GeoServer, VMware vCenter, sure a lot of you out there are using that, SolarWinds, ServeView, Adobe Commerce and Magento open source, typically Adobe always makes the list, Twilio Authy, and a Microsoft, just said I was going to mention again, IE vulnerability from 2012, which is surprising. Please stop using an Internet Explorer. It's 2024. What are you doing? Acronis cyber infrastructure, and then lastly and most recently, 2 vulnerabilities in ServiceNow, which were exploited in less than 2 weeks after they were publicly disclosed and patched back on July 10th. Just a quick note on that as well. ServiceNow announced patches for the security defects. I'm going to kind of sum this up. 2 with CVSS scores over 9, one with 9.3, the other with 9.2. Less than 2 weeks after the information became public, Resecurity observed threat actors targeting vulnerable ServiceNow instances for reconnaissance. Very concerning. They stated as well, to quote, foreign threat actors attempted to exploit the situation to extract data from both private sector companies and government agencies globally. And here are the numbers. Firm pointed out that there are approximately 300,000 internet-facing ServiceNow instances susceptible to threat actors probing, which they stated confirms the broad scale and significant penetration of the solution in enterprise environments globally. It is unclear at this time how many instances were vulnerable, according to Security Week, and as well, the largest number of instances exist in the US, the UK, India, and the EU. And then lastly, Resecurity did as well mention there has been identified chatter on multiple underground forums on the dark web, highlighting threat actors seeking compromised access to IT service desks, corporate portals, other enterprise systems that, again, do typically provide remote access to employees and contractors. Even for a product like ours, given that most security and endpoint management software integrates with ServiceNow, with potential actions to make instantaneous changes to devices in a corporate fleet, this shouldn't be ignored by any ServiceNow customers. Like I mentioned earlier, be sure to update if you haven't already. I always like to think if you haven't patched and in even just a few days have gone by, assume that you have been exploited already. Yeah. So there's my my big dump of information for everybody. Rocco, you had some additional information on AI. I
So
mean, here in
yeah, keep
cybersecurity, we don't talk about AI very often. So I'm interested to, I'm kidding, obviously.
it's the hot topic. Although now the new hot topic has the AI bubble burst. So that's a whole nother topic. What I specifically wanted to report on and dive a little bit into was again keeping to the governance perspective of things, regulatory environment, is the recent news how Meta has decided not to go forward with implementing some of its AI-based technology within Europe. As you know, the EU AI Act has gone full force recently, as I think it was last week, in which it was published and is now in force, where now there's regulatory compliance, similar, same basis of a data privacy as a GDPR, right? So basic, actual hard, heavy-handed penalties in place for the worst of offenders, on a ranging scale that can be, as GDPR is, not just a singular flat number, but a percentage of yearly revenue, um, based on company size. So Meta has decided not to go forward just because of what they deem as, a very complex and confusing environment right now because of the implementation of these laws, specifically also how member states are, just the enforcement of them between the EU, between the member states, and then just emerging legislature that is even present in the US. So it's specifically what I thought was interesting. The AI piece that they're pulling is AI that was is part of their Llama multimodal, that relates to, I believe it was smart glasses and on smartphones. So kind of like almost augmented reality, very functional. It's questionable if that could be lead to safety implications, right? Because that's what the high risk category really focuses on. It's operational technology, safety implications even more than data privacy, but actual physical possibility of harm. And it's just interesting how this is playing out because as you see legislation and regulatory concerns and regulation being developed amongst AI, there's a bit of the spook of like what and the fear of what AI will become, but also we don't want to stifle innovation, right? And the EU has taken a heavy hand approach, while the US so far has been, taking an approach toward we want to enable innovation first and foremost. So it's my question to you guys is what do you think should be the approach towards AI regulation? Should it be innovation first, or should it be safety first, or a mixture of both?
They gave us the easy out with that last part. I think it
Yeah.
definitely is a mixture of both. But if I'm gonna,
What
if
does
I'm
that
gonna
look like?
pick,
What does that look like though? Like what is a mixture of both?
innovation needs to happen probably within secure parameters that everybody has to kind of abide by again. Kind of like what I was talking about earlier, but the idea can be shown with art creation. AI is doing artwork that humans can't do. So what type of things can be generated, sold, and shared, that kind of stuff. That's going to be a lot more difficult to set security controls in probably a month versus a year whenever things start to catch up to it. They've already written like full South Park episodes based on information they've uploaded to it. So like it presents this question of what's better, human writers versus some AI intelligence, whereas there's this happy middle ground where humans are bolstered by the intelligence because it essentially finds a lot of information and can enable them to be more creative where they don't necessarily have to remember everything, certain lore aspects that happened in one episode for 1 minute, season one or something. Now they can reference this information real quickly so it can, bolster us. It's the same idea even with the security side of things, where they can represent humans, they can track trends. And I think that kind of innovation with certain restrictions, I think, is important to understand that this is the power that it's capable of, but also to understand the limitations if certain things are not what they're supposed to be. Something like fake information, disinformation, misinformation, that kind of stuff, in terms of things that can, what's that word, corrupt or misconstrue the data that the AI would be referencing. So did
Yeah,
I
that's a
answer it? Yeah.
great point.
No, you made a lot of great points.
I do agree with that. Say that, as much as you want to look at this in terms of being a trade-off, I mean, it is obviously great to have a balance
Mhm.
between innovation and as well keeping things secure. I mean, we need change control for far more things in life than we actually receive. Um, I look at AI as, of course, you've got your artistic aspect, and that's obviously advantageous to a consumer, because
Mhm.
consumers want to do less. Obviously, should be doing their chores, and that's what they really want AI to do. But when they are on their
Right.
when they are getting in whatever their form of technology is, whatever platform, to
Mhm.
get some joy out of it. But I mean, I like it in terms of a research perspective and making, like, say, my life easier with multiple regression and getting into data mining, filling in a lot of answers that I'm not sure. But when I think about that as well, I want to make sure, especially if it's trusted research, I'm getting it from a trusted source, not just any amount of
100%.
information from any variable that is completely left open.
Mhm.
That's where you have true vulnerabilities within the equation itself, and that's the part that I'm still fearful over or fearful around. So I'd like that to be improved. Do I know how that's going to be solved? You can say, I get all my information from one source. Well, then you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And I came from
Right.
financial services myself. I want diversification. We all need that in life. And I think that's also kind of a bit of a trade-off. So you got to really determine what is the best route.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
I really like what you said there in terms of, you mentioned change control. We can look
Mhm.
at it as societal change control, kind of, how the regulation is dictated, right? You don't want it to be too stifling to get things done within the process, but having guardrails is
Right.
very advantageous, especially, and guardrails, it's not about even guardrails for what we know, but what we don't know, right? Just having a process in place goes a long way. So
Right.
I think that is a plus, in terms of having something in place. You
Yeah, even
guys
to draw
seem
another
really,
parallel, if you're thinking about going from point A to point Z and B is the operation to get there, or maybe the variable you're using, think of like transportation again as a simple parallel, where we used to walk, we used to take horses, we used to take automobiles, and now we're driving Teslas, or Teslas are driving us. But they're still constrained to a road, so we still have constraints, we have laws, we have all these things in place to keep them in line. I think those similar kind of constraints will be needed to wrangle in the AI so it doesn't hallucinate from. I think actually John made a perfect example, making sure that the information it's drawing from is a trusted source, and we're getting
yes,
um, the
it's the key
the
to the
most
governance.
beneficial data in return to, again, make our lives easier, to get us to the betterment, the quickest way possible to giving a good solution.
I think it is interesting how, this is the last point real quick, how Europe is really setting a precedent for data privacy. Um, yeah, I think that's just an interesting fact. I don't really have an opinion on it. But
Observations are great as well. I mean, yeah, not everyone has to have an opinion to say this is or this isn't the way it's done, but discussion is obviously key. And I think that a lot of we're now getting into social issues right now. I think society obviously has a problem with that because they want everything to be dichotomous. They want the answer to it, but instead, hey, this is how politics works. It's the bare fundamental of it, discussion and determining where is it that we should go next. And I
100%.
unfortunately think that technology has made that a lot easier to just say no. I don't think it's really where we want to go. Your analogy earlier about the evolution of transportation took me back to, I think it was Back to the Future 3, where you said, well, in the future we run for fun. Run for
Oh
fun?
yeah.
What kind of future is that?
Love
Sometimes we
that movie.
do. Sometimes we do go back to our primitive nature as we do evolve. There, I guess the higher physiological need becomes more of your basic kind of day to day. Um,
Right.
400 years ago, who would want to be walking across because you had no other mode of transportation? Now, It's what we do for fun.
Yeah.
Rocco, did you have any other points? I
I
think
think we
Blaze had
touched.
a number of other topics as well.
We can go on this for a while. Oh, the one more thing that they want to touch on, I'll do this quick, is you want to touch on a number of solar winds vulnerabilities that were disclosed recently. So, this is kind of an addendum, and it's just kind of interesting, tying into this what I brought up the SEC portion before, and a little bit about an addendum to your third party vulnerability. Is we've seen a lot, and I specifically want to make this point because actually, before I make the point, what I'm talking about is what I'm referring to is SolarWinds recently on the 18th fixed 8 critical bugs in their asset access rights audit software. And we have seen a lot of these from SolarWinds in which high severity ratings, all of them were rated with 9.6 out of 10. They all have remote or the RCE vulnerabilities, which were 7 out of the 8, 9.6 out of 10. They all were remote control vulnerabilities. And seeing this, it's interesting tying into the SolarWinds events because clearly they've been putting out way more CVE alerts ever since their whole legal fiasco, right? But it also shows that, which we want to see, right? We want to see them fixing the thing, and letting the public know. But it also shows us the amount of tech debt. How when you're in a situation like that, this is why we say, why you have to build in. I mentioned before, we need to find a way so that to triage if you didn't build security in from the beginning, how to go about doing it, but why it's so important to build security into your SDLC process from the very inception of your SDLC process, because so you're not left with. I mean, they have a myriad of products, SolarWinds, and I'm sure they're still going through the process of uncovering vulnerabilities, fixing the flaws, discovering the flaws, reviewing them, and it may be a while before,
This has kind of been a topic for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
reactively, do you admonish your vendor or whoever it is in the industry, whether you use them or not, for the amount of critical, or let's not talk about severity, let's just say the amount of items that have been discovered, regardless of again impact. That's obviously concerning, but just the sheer quantity of issues that a product might patch in, say, the next month. I don't really. I more appreciate the amount that, hey, we've discovered it, we can learn from this, rather than look at, obviously, from an application standpoint, not an OS, like Adobe having released, was the last time I saw a report, far beyond any other vulnerabilities discovered with any other software. Well, as well, they do have a bunch of product lines. They appeal to many segments. They've had a product out there since the mid 90s, if not earlier, at least that we've all had heard of. So clearly, yeah, there are going to be a lot of numbers over the last 20 years of vulnerabilities that are discovered. And I think that that's great that we've discovered them, patched them. The only real problem is, are there environments out there that are still using, say, the old version of a product, and it's completely out of support? Obviously that's a problem. And I think that a vendor, if there's still potential for an unsupported product or an older product that is still being used, to offer some type of transition, to make it easier, if cost, whatever, an environment can't go to the next version, even if we're talking consumers. There's so many people out there still using XP. Let's be honest. 7. Well, let's just kill XP. Windows 7. We know that there's still. I don't want to go into that because I'm sure there still are, but still plenty of consumers that are using Windows 7, Windows Vista. I hope not. All unsupported versions of the OS, but it's all because they can't afford the licensing. So we're allowing them to be compromised. And I kind of look at Microsoft, as much as I'm certified myself. I've used Microsoft forever. It's part of my specialties, but as well, can you give them an easier route to upgrade? We got that with O365, but now obviously that's pushed more towards the enterprise, and it's still tough for some consumers, or they simply don't want to. They're fearful for, if I get a license, I'm gonna be watched by Big Brother. there's that kind of aspect which I don't agree with, but again, I think you kind of see where I'm going with this. I mean, I just
Yeah.
kind of opened up a lot on you guys, but that was my interpretation of where you're kind of going with the solar winds, especially is
Yeah.
again just the simply admonishing a manufacturer because of how many items had been discovered. Now more than ever, we need to get them discovered and move on to the next month. What is the next iteration you guys are going to come out with? Are you going to
Exactly.
have less next time?
Yeah, it's definitely it's a trade-off all the time. Even the disclosure, right? You mentioned disclosure before. In general, every time we see that the highest amount of exploitation of any vulnerabilities is right after a patch is announced, right? Because we're telling the world, but
Right.
what was wrong with the past versions, right? And and now the world knows. So we can question everything. I think it's a point of it's kind of like a variation we need to take in our approach, kind of Kirchhoff's principle, which was right that in terms of encryption, as long as the key is secret, everything else should be out there, easily accessible to know as long as the key is secret. I think in terms of take the same principle of we need to have secure mechanisms in place. Everyone needs to take a zero trust approach, and we need to get as much information out there for the good guys as well too to know what's going on. The more information in the public domain that isn't sensitive, obviously, in that way, the better. And we should be disclosure is a good thing. Ultimately, I think it has its trade-offs, but it's a good thing. I agree.
And we know through partnerships that there are plenty of manufacturers that are not disclosing anything to the general public. It happens. They resolve it proactively. That's good too. But for someone like me, I like knowing all the information. And I don't like, obviously what I don't know doesn't hurt me, but I'm sure many would agree it is also equally advantageous to us to know what specifically that issue was, so we know what to avoid. Great discussion, guys. Blaze, I think your next topics will be even more interesting for a discussion.
Yeah. So, what I've been evaluating are some trends that are occurring in 2024. There are many ways to keep yourself secure in these ways, and one of the proactive ways is to identify those current trends, learn from them, and adapt. Pretty much what we've just been talking about, and how we can continue to keep ourselves safe. I decided to look at a number of trends that are on the rise for 2024, and some were surprising, some were predictable, but I saw many as educational. The first one caught my eye, and it's called sextortion, sex sells, and apparently everybody's looking at it. But this was a particular article that was put out by Noble4, and it was particularly geared towards your teenagers. I think we're all kind of in this age where we kind of understand that probably certain things are being shared between everybody, and understanding that type of information is out there can lead to certain exploitation. And so they really know before actually released an article on how to keep your teens safe. I won't really go into that information, but I'll kind of explain what sextortion is, which probably sounds like what you think it is. We're all already familiar with it. It's the combining of the words sex and extortion. And it's when someone's sexual imagery is used to extort them, which put simply, it's someone, aka sextortionist. I love these like words for it, even though they're terrible people. Blackmails or threatens to expose another person's sexual imagery to make that person do something they don't want to do, like send more compromising photos, maintain contact, or send them money. Both online strangers and former romantic partners can sextort victims in an attempt to harass, embarrass, and control them. My solution to this is early and ongoing education of how to protect and control the data that is on your devices and what you share. I don't think you can teach that at too early of an age, especially with how devices end up in just about everybody's hands nowadays. I think it's important to not only let kids get exposed to it, but also to have certain parental controls and even review with them. Make sure you kind of understand what your kids are looking through, just like you would do it as a security professional. You have your users, you wouldn't let them do certain things. I think that same thing can apply to people in your own household, whether it's just with a relationship with your partner, understanding, what's going on. It's about boundaries, but it's also about, keeping each other safe. that's a discussion for you to have. But I think it's just one of those ways to kind of keep your household safe in the long run. Um,
I have a comment on that since we had already talked about AI.
sure.
Obviously, deep fakes. This is not new
Mhm.
news. It's been
Right.
around for some time, but they are becoming quite realistic. Um, Kind of just merging those two concepts there. I know this isn't really what you had wanted to talk about, Blaze, or what you
No,
had
it's fine.
prepared, but I'm just throwing it out there in terms of wondering what I'm sure it's already occurred.
Oh
Obviously,
yeah,
going back to the
there
early
is
2000s. Yeah.
there's so much um I'm going to call it filth, because whether it's what we just talked about in terms of sextortion, or just again subverting legitimate artists for what they're providing, these deepfakes are used essentially to manipulate you in some way to either believe something that that they want you to believe, or emotionally react to something to again exploit you in some way. Essentially, control is the end goal, but it's also to get some result out of it. And deepfakes, yeah, they're getting better. They're so much better than they were. I think whenever was it? I think Rogue One started using them with Princess Leia and Grand Moff Tarkin. It's gotten so much better over the years, and that can be seen as a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. If you've seen the new Indiana Jones, the movie itself, maybe not such a good thing, but the young Indiana Jones deepfake, pretty darn good, if you ask me. Um, and with those kind of things being said, what I always like to, whenever I was working in the educational field, when I was working at the schools, um, exposing the kids to digital content, creating stuff in like Minecraft or just simple like programming languages. All of these things were to get them exposed to how computers work. But I always thought that as an IT professional at the time, the concept that everything you're looking at on a screen is manufactured in some way to make you feel something or do something. None of it is like when you go outside and you see a tree, that tree's there because somebody planted it. Well, still, I guess it's manufactured in some way, but it's real. It's not necessarily 100% controlled by somebody to kind of do something. It's there, and you can find out reasons, stuff like that. Everything you see on screen is manipulated again to make you feel a certain way.
Yeah. I think a key point to all this too, to make known is one, in terms of just sex trafficking, people, I think it always shocks everyone to hear how much it actually is prevalent in the world we live in, and it's important,
Yeah.
very,
And just to
very
interrupt you real
important
quick,
to know.
that's kind of why I wanted to start
Close,
with it. It did
close,
surprise me. It's ongoing. It's something that I don't want to
yeah.
think about, but here it is happening. And
Hmm.
I actually had a friend in college where it happened to that person as well. And
Yeah.
it's not, you can't recover from it. It's really difficult to.
Yeah, and I think a second key point too is just a reminder that when we talk about cybersecurity incidents, when we talk about just the cybersecurity landscape, it's a lot darker than it's
Mhm.
not than just someone in a hoodie sitting, you know, in there, in a dark room, just trying to, trying to hack into someone's system. No, this is this affects real people's lives, not just from like people's social security numbers getting stolen. But I was listening to something over the weekend where this guy was talking about how he was contracted, part red teaming, right? Part of to hack into an OT environment in a city, and he wound up getting into their SCADA systems, and he wound up getting to the point where he could have dumped chlorine into the water and killed a lot of people by doing it. I mean, you know
Yeah.
very thankful that it was merely just a penetration test. But this is, it's done because that's really the capability that bad actors have, and this affects, cybersecurity is affecting real people's lives. It's not just, um, uh, you know, it really meets reality in a hard way, in a dark way. A lot of these bad actors we talk about, Scattered Spider, et cetera, Lockbit, right? They all have, I mean, they're criminal enterprises, and they have ties to organized crime, and it's a dark rabbit hole. It's not cute. I guess that's the
Yeah.
way you can sum it up. It's not cute.
And
Yeah.
then speaking of rabbit holes, in headlines, things to grab your attention that just send you down certain emotional paths. I mean, I kind of already almost forgot it because there just seems to be a new event every single day. But Trump got shot or shot at, but essentially it's a headline. Doesn't matter the actual content of it, but the fact is that a headline happened. And because such a high profile event happened, of course, again, those bad actors, those exploiters are going to try to gain access to your attention in some way. It could be phishing, it could be email. Well, phishing, there's a number of different ways. It could be vishing, send you messages, can call you, trying to get money, trying to get something, just again, some of the information from you. And the big bold letters I have written down is just think before you click. I think it's a very straightforward thing. And always just kind of, just keep in mind that while you could think you're going to something that you're getting some exclusive information, video, data, it could just be a malicious website that's going to essentially work to capture your data in some way. So again, just always be vigilant. In that case, for those social engineering attempts, but also as IT professionals, another thing that's on the rise is fake IT websites, kind of doing the same exact thing, but, and again, geared towards us as IT professionals. Whether we're providing services or support, it's crucial to consider the sources of our information. We just talked about with AI. If we are the AI, well, we're actually just the I, we're the intelligent. We need to make sure that the information and the controls and services we are providing our customers and clients is accurate and of good quality. These quality and reliability of sources can significantly impact how we effectively assist our clients and our customers. So those fake IT websites being on the rise, especially during high-profile events like outages or when something occurs that is monumental, like the shooting. We had both of those in July, so July's been a pretty rough month in general. With that being said, do you guys have any kind of controls in place to kind of keep you protected as you search for answers to some IT questions that might pop up?
I definitely agree with Think. I know that, obviously as we've evolved, we used to have channel surfing, right? And you just keep clicking, go, 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 go. Give me more information. I'm bored with this. I'm bored with this. Now, obviously, it's so easier to channel surf. I mean, now I'm kind of referring, I guess, more towards a consumer, but I mean, the same goes for me trying to find an error code for a PowerShell script execution that I'm not familiar with. I'm
Right.
going to Google it or use, whatever my preferred. I mean, that's more of the generic term now, but I search engine to find the answer there. For me, I'm first going to refer to my trusted source, which would be the forum of the manufacturer of where, said product that, going to my knowledge base basically. But if I'm not able to find my answer, then I have to start, branching out. At least for myself, I do use different devices for what I'm actually going to be reaching out to the internet for. So on that, I use a separate physical machine entirely that's on a completely separate network to typically try and do that. If it's something, say I'm going to, I don't know, even if I'm going to play a video game, it's on a completely different network than it is my sensitive environment. And I know that that's not easy for everybody out there. It's easier for us because it's like the same language that we talk every day. Like, hey, I'm managing 1,000 servers in this environment. Is it all that much harder to add an extra network to my home network? No.
Right.
For others, why do I need 4 routers sitting on the same desk? A little bit different, but it is, we have an incognito mode to save, in terms of cross-site script. There's a few extra protections there, but I think that there should be better protections for those that feel, here's information that I have protected, my photos. And if I want to grab more photos, I should be able to branch out beyond that, from one container to the next to get more information without compromising the data that I already have well protected. I don't think that I don't think there's any training in today's schools to teach that. When we talk about data containerization whatsoever, not even as far up in high school. We now have iPads in school. We know that. My niece got one, not, most kids are, but my niece got one actually for school when she turned 8 or 9. I was still running off an Apple II when I was in that age. And definitely a completely different device today. Definitely did not have any internet access whatsoever. And today it's just the Wild West. You can access whatever you want. And that's dangerous to me.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you need to allow list your life in some way. And then anything outside of that, you need to, kind of going back to Blaze's point about, the incidents, the security breakdown with Trump being shot, et cetera, was, the number one thing was how did, pre-planning, right? That was the number one. How did they let this happen, et cetera? You take those. They're supposed to use the same defense in depth principles, the same type of security principles that we're known in cybersecurity, where before you go somewhere that isn't marked trusted, right? Do some research on it. Before, if you're gonna go play sports at a park, you look what neighborhood that's in sometimes, or you look where it is, right? Don't just take things at face value. That is the number one rule. In terms of, I think personally, keeping right,
Yeah.
cyber
I think
training.
to simplify, yeah, I think to simplify pretty much what you both talked about. Is I had a list here that was, and you guys touched on probably half of what I have listed and gave me an extra one. So verify URLs. So make sure you know where you're going. Official channels. John mentioned both of those definitely, but also brought up segregation and segmentation, which is in case something does get exploited, it doesn't go through your whole network. So I think those are important. Then just kind of the basic things that I think you're bringing up, Rocco, essentially just enable the security features that you have available to you. Make sure they're running and doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. And then I think for me personally, as kind of just being outside looking in, be skeptical of every website and any communication, especially if it's unsolicited. Be skeptical of whatever you're looking at, just like John mentioned. If you have some sort of script that is going to have some sort of execution occurring, make sure you fully understand what that is. If it's a PowerShell script, don't copy the PowerShell script with the copy button. You don't know actually what that's copying. Copy it manually, put it in a notepad, make sure you are pasting in the command and running the command that you mean to be running. So simple things like that, just step one of the overall process, can save you some heartache later just by doing some simple things. But that's what I really have for the trends going on in at least this month of July 2024. So, John, I'll hand it back to you for the next part.
Yeah, the elephant in the room, biggest news of the month, and I hinted at it obviously in the beginning, and we've been kind of teetering on it without actually mentioning it. CrowdStrike. What the hell happened?
So, CrowdStrike. So what it is, it's a security company that many of us are now familiar with, probably in more depth than we ever have before. They're essentially trying to update and stop a recently discovered exploit, which was a method used to communicate within Windows primarily. These monitors are meant to work in real time, and the logic that got pushed had an error in it. So because of this faulty update getting applied to their Falcon threat detection, the platform couldn't execute a function. So it decided to crash and crash and crash continuously at boot and on about 8.5 million devices worldwide. So the begging question, is it fixed? Well, yeah, they fixed it, I think, within a few moments of it getting pushed out. But the problem is the damage was done. And further beyond that, why we're still hearing about it is essentially they couldn't push this fix to devices that couldn't boot. And so it left it in the hands of the lovely IT staff having to put hands to keyboard, eyes to monitors to boot into safe mode and apply the fix to essentially remove the update that was pushed, or just go in and delete the monitor that's in there. Or if you're looking at Windows, you could reboot it 15 times in a row too. And maybe on that 15th time, it might connect with the servers at CrowdStrike to actually push the update. That was one thing I saw that I laughed at, where I can't imagine somebody sitting there 15 times in a row for a potential thing that may or may not work. The next thing, of course, who were the most affected, I guess, segments? Primarily infrastructure. EDRs, antivirus, they are global. They are needed everywhere, and they do certain high level things that they have access to. So something like hospitals, healthcare were hit the most. 50% of the health code providers use CrowdStrike in the US, and about 80% have been recovered as of this recording. So they're looking at losses in terms of dollars and about $1.94 billion in losses. Banking was hit second hardest with about a $1.15 billion in losses. And then the one that probably I just barely missed being affected, which was Delta, which is transportation and airlines. I missed this by a few hours. I got in Thursday night, whereas the bug occurred, I believe, either Thursday night or Friday morning. They've only lost $0.86 billion. I love that I can say only. That's kind of scary, but Delta was forced to delay and cancel thousands of flights. And it just kind of keeps on going. Delta alone has canceled more than 5,000 flights, affecting about 500,000 people as of this recording. Delta will be under the microscope, as other airlines have been in the past when such record-breaking complaints have poured in like this. And then CrowdStrike itself has suffered as well. You can imagine something like this would hurt their reputation. An article actually came out that they were claiming to be rewarding people with $10 apology gift cards, but this was actually this was kind of fake. It was misconstrued. This was a $10 gift card going out to people that were assisting in bringing them back online, not necessarily an apology from CrowdStrike. They have corrected that misinformation, I guess. But CrowdStrike stock has tanked. So if you're looking to buy some probably stock that's going to rebound, because I still think they're a pretty decent company, and they're probably only going to get better because of this. You can buy some of that cheaper stock now.
We know
course,
you have to make sure you put the discllmer out. You're not a financial advisor. It's a
oh, I'm
cyber.
not a financial advisor.
I
I
got your
just read
back,
an
Blaze.
article.
I got your back, Blaze.
My man. Then, of course, manufacturing companies, retail, e-commerce, and education, like school and universities, all utilize this as well. So those are other obvious manufacturers or infrastructures that have taken a hit. So I'll put it to you guys. How can this type of thing be prevented? We're a cloud solution platform. So how can this be prevented in the future?
Better stage rollout.
That was my main
100%.
goal too. You said it earlier, phased rollout, and I almost jumped out of my seat. I found an article where they're looking at enhanced testing procedures, that obviously, phased rollouts and increased monitoring. I don't really think the first two, well, enhanced testing procedures could have helped. But essentially, if there's a bug in there getting pushed out already, the phased rollout would be the place where they would be able to combat that immediately and prevent it from affecting us globally.
I think it is, signature detection, right? It's kind of an urgent thing, but even as simple as you roll out 25%, in 10 minutes, the next 10 minutes, you roll another 25%, et cetera. Any type of phased rollout approach in this scenario, as little as it may be, would be beneficial. So,
yeah. Then, really, the last thing I want to say on it too is my thoughts were actually summed up by JJ Guy, which is the CEO of Sevco Security. This incident is Microsoft's fault, not CrowdStrike's fault. Yes, CrowdStrike pushed a kernel level update that caused widespread blue screens. Yes, that should have been caught during QA. I'm sure we will all get after action report that details why release procedures didn't catch it, but software bugs happen. They are unavoidable, even for top tier shops like CrowdStrike. This is a high impact incident, not because there was blue screens, but because it causes repeated blue screens on reboot and, as appears right now, to require manual command line intervention on each box to remediate it, and even more complicated if BitLocker is enabled. This is the result of poor resiliency in the Microsoft Windows operating system. Any software causing repeated failures on boot should not be automatically reloaded. We've got to stop crucifying CrowdStrike for one bug when the OS's behavior is causing the repeated systematic failure. I thought that was a really unique take on it. I'd have to agree. Essentially, it's the host problem in a way. Those are my thoughts on it. You guys are free to share your own as well.
No, totally. I mean, Microsoft has, I think Elon Musk even posted an AI, what was it, a catwalk fashion show thing making fun of all the world's leaders and everyone popular in media, and it ends on a fake Bill Gates with I think it was a tablet and with a blue screen because it was immediately after the event took place. So they're clear, and it wasn't the CEO from CrowdStrike. It was Bill Gates. It was Microsoft being blamed for it, and as well, obviously, it was the only operating system impacted by it. But I totally do agree because I mean, even today, for myself, I don't trust anything that's running on my bare metal install. I trust it in no regard. It's everything beyond that that I can provide redundancy to, whether it be a container or a VM, that I'm more concerned about, that actually I will have a copy of. So putting, trust in my single laptop install. I mean, yeah, one little thing goes wrong and the whole thing is scrapped. I think that there are clearly issues with it. I do have to give Microsoft credit though, because alternatively, they learned long ago, given the amount of blue screens they used to throw out there, and especially in my 15 years working with their products, all the things that I had to pick up the pieces for, which over the years they did get far better at with their insiders program, providing updates well in advance for our testing to make sure are we actually going to be impacted? Is my DNS server role going to be impacted for the sake of one particular update? And they would find that very, very early before it actually hits production, as most
Mhm.
IT administrators would only want to take the production update once it hits the public, not just going through the test environment. But I do have to agree. It is a bit of both. As much as we can blame CrowdStrike, they're still the massive market leader, I think I would have to say, compared to most other AV and EDR type products. And clearly, we saw how many customers they actually have, near 9 million.
Right.
That is a lot of devices out there concurrently running, especially one piece of software that were impacted by one single mistake.
Right. I don't know if that puts a target on their back or not, but
Yeah.
it's information that is now out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a topic we'll probably bring up next month as well, especially see how it evolves as we are going to start these with follow-ups. So I think that's it for us today. I hope this has been informative and useful for everyone. Every day, I always want to mention that the Syxsense team identifies, classifies, and pre-checks various patches and vulnerability content that affect common endpoints and servers. To get a full listing of all the various issues that may impact your environment, be sure to check our website under resources. You will see a link to the vulnerability database. What I personally love about it is that we not only discuss level of impact like everybody else, but we do offer recommendations and we do offer resolutions for most vulnerabilities. Thanks again for watching. Please be sure to like the episode and subscribe to be notified when future episodes are released.